Welcome to the exciting session of Digital Integration Hub. We will be covering how you can build Agile, data grid, and microservices in today's session. My name is Divya. I am from Waldorf, Germany, working as a product manager in Cloud Platform Integration Suite area. In terms of the agenda for today's session, we would be showing what is the current API-based integration architecture, what are the challenges of this architectural pattern, and how can we resolve this using the Digital Integration Hub architectural pattern. Finally, leaving you with a solution blueprint, a reference solution blueprint, which is based on the interactions that we have with some of our customers who are already implementing it and what has been their experience with it. So without much ado, let's go into the first part of the agenda today, which is to build and design an API-based integration pattern and some of its challenges. This is a quote from Gartner, which talks about how API, or how they like to call it as application programming interfaces, are mainstream. These are the building blocks for modernization, the digital modernization, the core of all of it. When we look at the APIs, this is what connects the digital applications, whether it's your mobile application or a web-based application that you're building, with the APIs that resides in your cloud services or in your business suite services. This could be from SAP or non-SAP. The API could also expose the data that resides in your database, which could be a HANA DB or PostgreDB, for example. You might be sharing these APIs with your partners or suppliers, or enabling the whole business network around these APIs. This is why we say that APIs are the fundamental digital blocks. It powers your apps in digital interaction. It also allows you to foster collaborations and co-innovation by sharing your APIs with your partners, suppliers, your own customers, internal application developers and external application developers, enabling you to have an omni-channel access for your APIs. This is what drives the innovation. So we use, for example, the Google Maps APIs. Using the APIs, we build beautiful application. So these are the ways in you can expose your own data as well and enable your own ecosystem. Finally, API contains a lot of rich insights into how your consumer are using these APIs. This allows you to fine-tune your consumption experience further. It also allows you to handle the error scenarios if it comes in, also any kind of security loopholes that you identify with your APIs. So a constant monitoring, reporting of the API usages helps you in further enabling the usage of the scenarios. So let's look at a typical API-based integration pattern. So at the beginning of it, we would have all the application and data, which is stored in what we call it as system of records. So this could be, as we said, could be your business suite system, like an S/4HANA or an ERP or a SuccessFactors system. This could be the cloud services. It could even be the databases that we spoke about, using which you're building your own microservices, for example. You may use an integration middleware, which acts as an orchestration, mediation, and transformation layer. It could be that you're combining data from multiple backends. You're transforming the data into a format that is expected by your consumer. All of this logic you would write into your integration middleware. You must be using an API gateway layer, which allows you to design these APIs based on the consumption experience that you have. This is where you define your security policies. This is where you get all the analytics associated with the APIs. And in case you need it, you can also enable your APIs for monetization. For example, if you have a very good API, let's say an address cleansing API, you can charge your consumer for the usage of this API, generating new revenue streams for you. And finally, we have the channel layer, which is what we call it a system of engagements. This could be the digital applications that you're building, like a mobile application or a web-based application. This could even be shared with your partner and supplier so that they can connect with you without even reaching out to you directly with an API interfaces. If you look at it, we are following the same concept within SAP. So we share our APIs in API Business Hub. You try these APIs out and build the digital extension stories around this. So with this integration pattern, there are certain challenges, and that's what we will be covering in the next segment. So when we have an API-based approach, especially when you have a digital application like a mobile app, the response of APIs is crucial. If a data is not returned in seconds, we assume the backend is down. So the more the number of calls that hits your backend, the more overloaded your backend is going to be. Also, if you have an integration scenario where you're doing a mediation across multiple data sources, slowly the effort that you put into your integration work keeps enhancing or increasing. And this is a quote from Gartner which talks about how an API based access of data, especially when the data is multiple sourced, is costly and requires notable integration work. So let's look at some of, or basically the three topmost challenge with an API based integration approaches. First is when you have large enterprise applications. You can scale them to meet the API targets. If you have millions of calls hitting your backend, you can for sure scale them horizontally by putting more and more backends, but it's going to be costly for you to scale it out. Not just that, you have to manage it yourself, especially when the data resides on-premise. You are responsible for scaling these backends yourself, which can be costly in the long run. Secondly, it is very difficult for you to leverage the cloud native functionality, things like zero downtime, high availability. When you want to do it on top of a legacy system, it becomes extremely hard to do it. So how do you bring the cloud nativeness that your consumption layer expects you to have? That becomes a challenge. Lastly, when you have the data fragmented across multiple SAP systems or maybe between SAP and non-SAP system, you need to build a lot of integration effort to combine this data set and expose it as a unified interface for your consumer layer. So these are the three challenges that exist with the current integration pattern. And how do we solve that is the next part of our talk. This is where the digital integration hub concept comes in. When we look at the digital integration hub, it's a very simple concept. At the heart of it, it talks about putting a large in-memory data cache, fast cache. This is where all the high throughput API calls comes in. This is from where all the API calls are returned so that your backend is not bombarded with too many API calls. So let's see what are the key components of the digital integration hub. So first and foremost is what we call it as the high performance data store. This is where you would store the data that is relevant for your consumption layer. This could be your application, this could be what your suppliers need. And you don't have to store all the data that exists in the backend, but just the data that is relevant for your fast responsive application. Second thing that you can do is in this data performance store, you can store a single consolidated view of the entities that is spread across multiple backends. So you can combine the data set in this data table and expose it out. There is still a front-end API gateway layer. This is where all your API call first comes in. All the security best practices and the analytics is still triggered by the API gateway layer. There are slight variations that the gateway now does. For example, the read call goes directly through the data cache and the write call directly goes to the backend system. Because the number of read calls is always higher than the write calls, so your backend is still protected. And in terms of architectural pattern, this is called as a command query responsibility segregation, which is also short named as CQRS pattern. And the API gateway allows you to seamlessly does it for you. Since you have an API gateway layer, your consuming client will not even realize which layer is handling which calls. In case you're wondering, the integration pattern in the integration middleware is still there, but the responsibility of the integration middleware changes slightly. Instead of doing a lot of orchestration and transformation, integration layer at this point in time is mostly responsible for keeping the records in sync. Its responsibility is to keep the data store as well as the backend data in sync, and this is where the event-driven architecture pattern comes in. So instead of polling your backend continuously, you can use an event-driven approach to subscribe to the events so that any changes that happens in the backend is automatically updated into your data store as well. So let's look at some of the key benefits of the digital integration hub. The first top that we spoke about is the responsive UI. Since the user experience layer is directly interacting with the data store, which is also on cloud, it gets faster response time. So you can address the need of the API caller, return a data in milliseconds. You also get to decouple your front end and back end. So any innovation, the cloud nativeness that we spoke about, you can do it on the cloud layer, and your back end can be scaled in at later point in time as well. It also protects your backend with the massive number of calls that the chatty interfaces of the digital apps calls for. When you build a mobile application, it may return and call multiple times the same backend, and since we live in a stateless architectural pattern, this layer of decoupling protects your backend from large number of calls coming from the front-end application. It also allows you to modernize your legacy system in a cloud-native approach. So all the zero downtime, high availability that we spoke about, which is really relevant for your app, you can do that on the intermediate layer as well, and you can update your backend at a need of the time when you want it to be. The next advantage of Digital Integration Hub is the notion of normalizing of the APIs. You can create your own virtual aligned data model in this layer and create an experience API that you need from this pattern. In this layer, you can also expose the data which is residing in multiple backends. Since the data is picked up from the intermediate data cache, you won't have the performance penalty of doing the composition at an integration layer. And lastly, since the data resides in a database, you get to combine the data of API analytics usage with the functional usage that the data resides using something like an SAP Analytics Cloud, for example. So let's look at the landscape view, how it looks like. So we still have the system of records, the application data. This could be, as we said, the S/4HANA system, the microservices that you're building, the SuccessFactors services, or the SAP backend or a legacy system that you have. It could even be a third-party application that you might be using within your layer. The channel, which is the mobile, web, social, or the ecosystem, still remains the same. So let's see how the layering happens in this pattern. First thing is we would have the integration middleware, which includes cloud platform integration, the event broker with enterprise messaging, which allows you to subscribe to these events from SAP S/4HANA system, for example, or the SAP backend system, or a non-SAP system. Once this is done, it allows you to expose and combine the real-time events using a pub/sub model. On the front end, you would use the API management layer, which becomes your enterprise API fabric. This is where you would design the API, document this API for your internal as well as external application developers. You would define your security policies, basically your governance policy, which decides how you want to expose your APIs, how you want to throttle the number of calls, how you want to share your API keys, whether it's OAuth based authentication or API key based authentication. This is the layer where you would also apply your API monetization aspect. So you define your rate plans and combine it with the API products. Finally, you would use something like an SAP HANA service to build the real-time in-memory data grid that we spoke about, and from here you can also connect to Analytics Cloud to get the required analytics information. And this data you would be exposing as a microservice. So with this pattern, what you get is the responsiveness for your multi-channel access layer. You also get to the benefit of having your APIs up and running 24/7, and it also, most importantly, brings you the independence from your business system, both technologically as well as from an organizational concept point of view. So let's look at a reference solution blueprint of how you can achieve this scenario or this pattern. So here, for example, you could see we have the S/4HANA system. This could even be any of the backend or legacy system, or an SAP ECC or a CRM system. Your data could be in any kind of a database system. You could use something like a smart data integration. With that, you would also have a data provisioning agent which would connect to the SAP HANA database running on cloud. You would be exposing this database as an OData API using the cloud application programming model. You could very easily expose and build microservices, deploy it onto the cloud platform. So how you can connect the data now from the SAP system into this HANA database if you have the data maintained in S/4HANA Cloud or a SuccessFactor, and maybe you also need some kind of a transformation and combining the data from multiple resources. This is where the cloud platform integration service comes in. You can pull the data from the multiple systems. In case your data is stored in a third-party application, you can read the data using open connectors. In open connectors, you get more than 160 connectors to the top cloud applications from non-SAP. You can pull this data, combine it using the open connectors adapter in cloud platform integration, and push it to the SAP HANA database on cloud. If you would like to leverage the event-driven architecture, you can use enterprise messaging. And using enterprise messaging, you can subscribe to the events coming from the SAP system, as well as via open connectors, the events coming from the non-SAP system, and publish it back to CPI, and from cloud platform integration, publish it to the HANA database. Now, when your consumption layer comes in, the read call via API management would go to your microservices, and the write calls via cloud platform integration would go to the HANA database. And this is the digital integration hub pattern, which you can realize using the cloud platform integration suite services that we have, enabling you the best of the both worlds, allowing you to connect to the front-end application, making responsive user experience, connecting to the back-end system using cloud platform integration, open connectors, and API management. So with this, we come to an end of today's session topic. So thank you very much, and thanks a lot for attending the session.